Best contemporary book of the year? I think yes. What up, reader fam? Today I'm going to be sharing my thoughts, opinions, and feels on Wapa, A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. That kind of rhymed. Hey! This book follows a Muslim girl named Shireen, and it takes place 2 years after 9/11 has happened. She now lives in a world full of people who are prejudiced against her. Because of this, Shireen has kind of built up this wall to protect herself. She becomes pretty closed off because she doesn't want to deal with anyone because it always ends in pain. Her and her brother form a breakdancing crew, and it becomes her escape from a world that is constantly hurting her. A boy named Ocean steps into her life and begins to try and break down her wall. But she keeps closing the door on him in order to protect herself from the inevitable pain it will lead her to. I'm honestly at a loss for words with this book, even though I'm gonna sit here and just praise its greatness. I don't really want to hype it up, but at the same time, I feel like this book deserves all the hype. In my eyes, it's a masterpiece, like it's a literal work of art. The story itself is really painful because we follow this main character who has to deal with racism on the daily, and we follow her fighting not to let herself drown in it. Something that I think this book does really well is how it kind of captures so many different emotions. You'll be angry one minute, laughing another, crying another, angry out of your mind the next minute. And I think this book also just has so many great messages tucked away in it. One message that really stuck out to me is how it's not the job of marginalized voices to educate ignorant people, and how people should stop expecting that from them. If I were to give this book any kind of critique, which I do like to keep my reviews pretty balanced with positive and negative things, I think it would just be that I wish the romance wasn't the biggest part of the plot. Not even because I didn't like it, because I actually liked the romance in this book, which is saying something because I often don't like romance in YA books. I personally really liked the relationship in this book, but I feel like maybe the plot should have focused on something else besides the romance. Like maybe it could have focused more on the breakdancing element and kind of had the romance on the side. But either way, I love this book. It was honestly hard for me to find something to critique, but like I said, I like to keep these reviews balanced for you guys. Those are all my non-spoilery thoughts. I'm now going to be jumping into a spoiler section where I'm going to break down my thoughts more so on different things that happen in this book. So if you have not read this book, you're going to want to go and read that book and then come back and join me for the discussion section. If you have read this book, then let's discuss. I'm going to be breaking up this spoiler section into 5 different sections. I'm going to be talking about racism, the family relationships, breakdancing, the relationship with Ocean, and then my favorite moments throughout this book. So let's start with racism. Racism was obviously one of the main themes in this book. I honestly wasn't expecting to go into this book and just instantly feel rage for our main character, but it was just so frustrating seeing her walk into class and having her teacher talk to her in such a condescending way. So, he smiled, you understand that this is an honors English class. I hesitated. I wasn't sure what he was expecting me to say to such an obvious statement. Finally, I said, yes? Sweetheart, I think you might be in the wrong class. Like, shut your mouth with that sweetheart nonsense. Listen, me personally, I want you to stay, okay? But this is a really advanced class, and even though I'm sure your English is really good, it's still, my English, I said, isn't really good. My English is effing perfect. She speaks English and is born in America, and yet people still question her. I loved her no BS attitude when dealing with it, even though it is kind of sad knowing how she kind of had to create that attitude and having to deal with racist people all the time. But she's not gonna allow a teacher to talk to her in a degrading way. She's not gonna let it slide. She's gonna serve some back talk on a platter. Reading of all the things that she'd endured just really hurts your heart. Like 2 weeks into her freshman year, she's attacked by these 2 guys and they take off her scarf and try to strangle her with it. Getting the details of that was just so heartbreaking. How the boys who did it were just sent home and weren't disciplined at all. Like, are you kidding me? And the officer who dealt with the situation gave her the number to child services. How freaking absurd is that? I repeat, the boys strangled her with her scarf and the officer did nothing. It just makes me so sad too because she just goes her days of minding her own business, not bothering anyone else around her, and yet people constantly come up to her and mess with her. They'll ask her things like, are you hiding bombs under your hijab? Or they'll say she's secretly bald or she's hiding the fact that she's a man. And I just can't comprehend having the nerve to talk to another human in that way. How are people so incredibly cruel? How do they let these pieces of hatred just form within them? I think I was honestly more surprised with how the teacher teachers treated Shireen. We're kind of taught to look up to teachers and to see them with nothing but respect. And I'm not saying that every teacher is bad, but with anything, there are the good eggs and there are the bad eggs. And there were a lot of bad eggs that were showcased throughout this book. Like, some of them had my jaw dropping with how they treated Shireen. Like, she walks into math class, her math teacher sees her and goes off on this speech to the class about how if you're living in America and you don't love America, then you just need to leave. As if she's wearing a shirt that says, I hate America. No! It's gotta be so draining being her. She endures so much. And while she's gotten good at putting up these walls, I imagine that at some point, those walls are broken down with how mean people can be, and it's gotta affect you and just completely overwhelm you. I'm not fully done talking about racism because it'll come back into play when I talk about the Ocean relationship, but I'm gonna move on to family relationships now. The contrast between her and her brother was really interesting to read about. She loves him, but at the same time, she can't help but resent him a little bit because of the fact that he doesn't have to endure the same amount of discrimination that she has to deal with, mostly because he doesn't wear anything that makes him stick out. I thought it was really neat learning about Naveed's backstory with dyslexia, how he had been keeping it a secret, and then Shireen had been the one to kind of come in and save him and rescue him from dealing with it. She helps him learn how to string words together and helps him find understanding in words. And that takes a lot of love and patience. That is not an easy thing to do. And for me, that was a sign of how close they really were. The parent-child relationship in this book was really interesting to read about. I feel like her parents definitely fall on the tough love spectrum. It's definitely clear that they love their children. They just show it in different ways. I did really feel bad about the fact that Shireen isn't really able to share the tough things that she faces because her parents don't really feel like the upbringing that Shireen faces compares to what they faced, which I know that her parents went through so much, but I also felt really bad that they kind of dismissed her pain. Like, the pain that Shireen feels on a daily basis is valid. And it just made me sad that she didn't feel like she could confide in her parents because they would just dismiss her feelings. I did like seeing the father and daughter relationship. I feel like they had a really neat relationship. How he always has these different projects that they work on together, and how he taught her all these really useful things like how to sew, how to split firewood, how to change a tire. It was just really nice to see that side of their relationship because when you first meet the parents, they come off as really cold. Next up, let's talk about the breakdancing. I wish that I was capable of breakdancing, but that ain't ever gonna happen. I feel like breakdancing was really a catapult in her really building up her confidence. I feel like the breakdancing was really the first time we ever truly see her kind of happy. And I think that's just because it filled her with so much joy and purpose. Here's this thing that she had been dreaming of doing for so long, and she's finally getting the chance to do it. I really liked seeing how the breakdance battle empowered her. She goes there and nobody is looking at her with judgmental eyes. Everybody just has eyes full of respect for the breakdancers and the art of breakdancing itself. It was so nice seeing that too because she's constantly in these places where she doesn't feel safe. So to have a place like that where she feels safe is super rare. And it's not only just this random place, like it's a place where she's going to see breakdancing, which is something that she's super passionate about. So that on top of it just makes it so much better. I'm really glad that the talent show ended up going well because I was so nervous that the racists were just gonna come and ruin everything, but it was nice to see her just have her moment, even though she hated the attention it brought. It was crazy to see how people were putting her on a pedestal because it was the same people who were pressuring her to break up with Ocean or were saying these racist comments to her. Oh, how the tables turned ever so quickly. Next, let's talk about the relationship. You know what the best way to get to know someone is? Conversing over the skinning of a dead cat. It was so cringy watching Ocean make these assumptions about her culture. My favorite thing ever was just her playing along with it though, like, oh, if you text me too much, be careful, you might have to marry me. I really liked seeing Shireen kind of face these really confusing feelings that she starts to have towards Ocean. It was just written so well how these thoughts of the other person just starts to creep into your mind and you're like, why am I thinking about this person? I shouldn't be thinking about this person. She even just tries to cover up every trace of him. Like when one day Ocean stops by their breakdancing session at the end of school and Jacoby asks Shireen what he wanted and she lies about it and she's just like, why did I lie about it? What did I gain in lying about it? I just love the way how Tahereh Mafi wrote about how she really just started seeing Ocean. She didn't really allow herself to see him beforehand because she had her armor up. She was trying to protect herself. But slowly, as she starts to let her armor down, she starts to see Ocean for who he is. I loved how she was just straight up with Ocean too. She was just like, let's get to the point. What's happening here? What are you doing? Why are you interested in me? I loved that moment when she literally becomes lovesick. She runs into Ocean. Next thing you know, she's got a fever. I can see people reading this and having the argument that there's not really any foundation on Shireen's feelings for Ocean because she doesn't really know much about him even when she's falling for him. And that really shines through when Naveed is revealing all these different things about him. She's like, what? He's on the basketball team? But I think a big starting point for their relationship is just the fact that Ocean went out of his way to try and connect with her because she hadn't really had that before, especially in a world where most people are trying to hurt her with their words. It's kind of hard to have an understanding as to why Shireen wants to drop Ocean until we see the repercussions of them publicly dating. And this is where I'm kind of going back to the racism. People don't think it's okay for them to be dating. And we see that in people calling her Aladdin, a guy throwing a cinnamon roll at her. Worst of all, when she goes to clean up after the cinnamon roll situation, she has her hair exposed and this girl comes and takes a picture of her and spreads it throughout the school. Honestly, my heart hurt so much during that scene. People cross so many boundaries and are so invasive. And it just blew my mind how bad things got. The hacked email was so crazy. Like, talk about things getting bad. And I honestly was so disappointed in the school. I thought that they would have done a lot more, but they were really only doing damage control. And don't even get me started on the basketball coach. What a douche. That scene of him taking Shireen into his office and yelling at her. Oh! The rage I had within me while reading that. The rage. He's already putting the student in an uncomfortable situation by having her alone in his office. And add on top of that, him being disgusting and yelling at her and trying to force her to break it off with Ocean. Like, get a hobby other than Ocean, coach man. I hated so much how everything just had her questioning her worth. We really start to see her being like, am I even worth it? Is it worth it for Ocean to stay with me? And Ocean's mom getting involved was also really uncomfortable. She reveals that she doesn't have money set aside for Ocean like he thinks she does, that he needs the scholarship now, so she's putting that pressure on Shireen. All the adults in this book just drove me crazy. Like, get it together. It became pretty clear that no matter if they're in a relationship or if they're not in a relationship, like, there's going to be complications no matter what. And I really liked how this book came to a close and how they did end up being together and they were secure in their relationship. And I did like the fact that Shireen ended up having to move in the end, even though that was kind of heartbreaking that they're going to be separated. The ending to me was very realistic because it's not the first time that Shireen has had to move because of her dad's job. Like, this has happened time and time again, so it makes sense that it would have to happen again. Lastly, let's talk about my favorite moments in this book. My first favorite moment was just when Naveed reveals to Shireen that he wants to start a breakdancing crew, and she's just like, F yeah! And she says that right as her mom is walking in, and her mom just walks over with a wooden spoon and smacks her on the head with it. Perfect timing to curse Shireen. Number 2, I just love that section where she talks about why she even wears a scarf. Number 3, the scene where Ocean and Shireen are discussing fashion. They're discussing the shoes that she's drawn on, and Ocean's just like, you sit in front of me, he said. He looked me right in the eye, and he almost smiled, but it looked like a question. You've been sitting in front of me for 2 months. I stare at you every day. My eyes widened, and then I frowned. I didn't even have a chance to say the words before he said, I didn't mean, he shook his head, looked away. Wow, I didn't mean that. Like, I stare at you. I just mean that I see you. You know? I feel like Ocean is constantly needing to put his foot in his mouth. Like, some of the things that he says are just whack. Number 4, I really liked a conversation that Jacoby had with Shireen. He really comes through with breaking down Shireen's doubts about herself. He talks to her about her frustrations and how, yeah, her frustrations are hecka valid, but how being angry all the time will just break her down in the end. And I just really like seeing her start to question herself after that conversation. Number 5, the conversation that she has with Mr. Jordan that happens after that bad experiment he had in his class. Anyway, they resolved that situation, but I loved the conversation that comes out of that about it not being Shireen's job to educate people and how she's just exhausted from even trying to break through to people. I just felt like that conversation was incredibly important. So those are all my thoughts, opinions, and feels on A Very Large Expanse of Sea by Tahereh Mafi. Again, this book was incredible, and I want to hear all your thoughts down below in the comments. What did you guys think about this book? What were your favorite moments in this book? What were your least favorite moments? Let me know all your thoughts down below in the comments. If you like this video, be sure to give it a big thumbs up. I post videos frequently on this channel, so if you want to see more bookish content from me, be sure to go and hit subscribe. or go and click the little bell icon and you'll be notified every time I post new videos. As always, thanks for watching, guys, and I will see you soon with a new video. Bye, chew.